Hey Life Designers, welcome to this week's episode of the vlog. You may have noticed that I've been absent for the last week or two. I apologize for that. I've been doing some overseas traveling, but I am excited to be back and I'm excited to be sharing with you what I learned on my trip because I wasn't just simply on vacation, I was actually doing some research. I want to share with you this book title, and it's called The Blue Zones: 9 Lessons for Living Longer from the People Who Have Lived the Longest. Now, if you've not heard of the Blue Zones, I have noticed lately they're getting a lot of traction. There's some podcasts and some other blogs are really talking about the Blue Zones quite a bit. Now, the idea behind these Blue Zones is that there are 5 locations in the world. One is in Southern California, one in Okinawa, one in Costa Rica, one in Sardinia, Greece, or Sardinia, Italy, and the last is in Ikaria, Greece, which is an island off the mainland of Greece. And Ikaria happens to be where I spent my time in the last couple of weeks. I was visiting the Blue Zone there and really trying to get a sense of how people live in this Blue Zone. And I have to say it was a really fascinating, enlightening experience. And over the next few weeks, my goal is to take the concepts of the Blue Zone. See, across these 5 zones, they've identified a number of characteristics that are common across these different Blue Zones. And I've talked briefly about them in the blog write-up down below. But over the next few weeks, I'm going to go into much more detail about each of these different commonalities and really talk about how to apply them to our life design and really taking the principles of these people who live in these Blue Zones and seeing how do we apply them to our lives in a practical, sustainable way. Now, as far as the book goes, I highly recommend this book. I really do. I was worried at first that it wouldn't be very applicable to real life here, in the United States, for example, or anywhere else. These Blue Zones are very remote, they are unique, and yet the concepts really do apply. And they're very portable, and I've already adopted some of the thinking from the Blue Zones. I've already started to apply those principles to my own life, and I'm going to share a couple of those with you today, and then even more over the next few weeks. So as far as the book goes, I definitely recommend it. I think it's a great book for anyone who simply wants to improve their quality of life in their later years. And I actually think it almost doesn't matter what age you are at right now, because some of the principles work exceptionally well the earlier in life that you apply them. But some of the principles, as you will discover, are applicable at any point in time. So it's a great book. I definitely recommend it. And I hope you'll stick with me throughout the next few weeks as we dive into some of these ideas in a lot more detail. And like I said, today I'm just going to share a couple of observations, some of my higher level takeaways from my week of living with the folks in the Ikaria Blue Zone. So with that, stay with me. We're going to jump right in. So now, as far as my biggest takeaways, I've been thinking of them as there's 2 main polarities that really struck me. And I like thinking of them as polarities because as you apply them to your own life, or as I'm applying to my life, it's helpful to think of them as a spectrum rather than a binary either yes or no. And really, noticing how I'm behaving today and how I might move in the direction of a positive benefit. So let me just share with you the polarity so you can understand what I'm talking about. The first one is simplicity versus complexity. One of the things that really struck me about the people who are living in Ikaria is the general simplicity of their lives. Now, of course, some of this is related to the fact that they are largely a farming community. They have technology there. Of course, they have electricity and running water, but generally speaking, their lives are relatively simple. But the idea there is that simplicity brings along with it a lot of benefits. And I began to notice in my own life how I make things more complex than perhaps they need to be. Not to say that I want to revert all the way back to the level of simplicity, or even that I could, that people have in Ikaria, but there are ways that I am making my life more complex than it may need to be. And because of that complexity, I'm having to invest more energy, more time, more money, any number of resources. I'm having to invest more to accommodate that complexity. A simple example is just the production of these videos, and this blog. How much time do I put into the production quality, and how important really is that? Am I creating stress for myself? I've now gotten to the point where I don't stress out about it too much. But it's just the idea that the more complex I make it, the harder it is to do. And at some point in time, there's a diminishing value. So what I've really done, since I've gotten back from the trip, is I'm really looking at my life and noticing the ways where I'm creating my own complexity and how that's causing me to have to overexert myself or spend too much of my attention and my resources to accommodate. So I'm really trying to create simplicity in my life in many different ways, and I'm going to share those ways with you over the next few weeks. But I encourage you to do the same for your own life. Is just look at the ways that you're creating complexity in an unnecessary way, and try to figure out how you can recoup some of that energy, some of that emotional investment by just creating a simpler outlook on your life. The second polarity that I took away from my time in Ikaria was the notion of more versus enough. I was really struck by the overall sentiment of all of the people who I met in Ikaria. I was struck by their kind of acceptance of whatever they have, it being enough. And as I mentioned before, they tend to live a much simpler existence in the sense that they're typically a rather poor economy there. They're a small island. There's really no industry. They're largely a farming community. So their overall economic stature is relatively low, and yet there's this feeling that they have enough. I was really struck by one instance where we went and we visited a woman who was in her 90s, and she probably lived in the poorest of homes that I visited during my time, and I got the real sense that she doesn't have a lot of money, and yet we were bringing 15 students into her home, and she insisted on cooking for all of us, and I really was really just struck by that, and it was really heartwarming to notice how she just felt like that was an important thing for her to do as a host. She probably couldn't really afford to cook for all of us and to offer up that food to us. And yet that was important to her because she feels like she has enough and that was an important part of her life. So this idea that whatever we have, is it possible that that's enough? As opposed to the way that I typically hold my own life, and that I think a lot of people do in our culture, is there's always the opportunity for more, and more is always better. Now the problem with that is it creates a ratcheting effect, and you're constantly having to do more, and having to achieve more, and having to have better this and better that. And it never ends, of course, it never ends. So, the idea of shifting from a more is better to a I have enough mentality struck me as being a really useful kind of move. And I've really been trying to apply that to my life as well. And I'm going to share some of those stories with you over the next few weeks as time allows. So in the meantime, I hope these two principles are resonating with you, and you can start to see how perhaps you're creating too much complexity in your life, and how simplifying that might help you to have more energy, more resources to dedicate to other things, and of course lower stress. And then the notion that you have enough, or that you are enough, or that the deliverable that you're working on, the project that you're working on, is good enough, as opposed to always trying to perfect it and always trying to be better and always trying to climb any particular ladder that might be in front of you. So hopefully these two ideas are resonating with you, and you can think about ways to apply them to your own life in order to improve your overall life design. So with that, I hope you are looking forward to the Blue Zone series that I'm going to be offering over the next few weeks. I'm excited to be exploring the topics with you. And as always, I appreciate your time and your attention. And until our paths cross again, I wish you a prosperous journey and take care.